Blog Talk Radio.
Behold, the earth is filled with things of usefulness. They are prepared to your hand for a purpose, but the task is upon you to seek them out and learn their use. This is the tuition for the management of your inheritance. What you know to be good, seek for, and it shall be found. You may plumb the seas and pluck the stars. You may live in everlasting glory and savor eternal delights. Above and below, and all about, there is nothing beyond your reach. All, with one exception, is yours to attain. Then God laid his hand upon man, saying, Now you are even as I, except you sleep there enclosed in matter, in the kingdom of illusion, while I dwell here in the freedom of reality and truth. It is not for me to come down to you, but for you to reach out to me. Man then saw wonder. Unbounded vision filled his heart, and he beheld beauty in perfection. The ultimates of truth and justice were unveiled before him. He became one with the profound peace of eternity and knew the joys of unceasing gladness. The eternal ages of time unrolled as a scroll before his eyes, and he saw written thereon all that was to become and occur. The great vaults of heaven were opened up unto him, and he saw the everlasting fires and unconsumable powers that strove therein. He felt within himself stirring of inexpressible love, and unlimited designs of grandeur filled his thoughts. His spirit ranged unhampered through all the spheres of existence. He was then even as God himself, and he knew the secret of the seven spheres within three. Then God lifted his hand from man, and man was alone. The great vision departed, and he awoke, only a dim and elusive recollection, no more than the shadow of a dream, remained. But deep within the sleeping soul there was a spark of remembrance, and it generated within a man a restless longing for he knew not what. Henceforth, man was destined to wander discontented, seeking something he felt he knew but could not see, something which continually eluded him, perpetually goaded him, and forever tantalized him. Deep within himself, man knew something greater than himself was always with him and part of him, spurring him on to greater deeds, greater thoughts, greater aspirations. It was something out beyond himself, scarcely realized and never found, something which told him that the radiance seen on the horizon but dimly reflected the hidden glory beyond it. Man awoke, the revelation and the vision gone. Only the grim reality of the earth's untamed vastness surrounded him. But when he arose and stepped down onto the bosom of his mother earth, he was undaunted by the great powers that beset him, or by the magnitude of the task ahead. Within his heart he knew destiny lay beyond the squalor of his environment. He stepped out nobly, gladly, accepting the challenge. That's from the Colburn Bible on the creation of humanity. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is FallenAngels.tv, and I thank you again for joining me for another Sabbath as we discourse on all the secrets of the universe and the secrets contained within the gospel that it seems like more and more are being interested in and seeking introspection upon. And so I'm grateful for the ongoing fellowship of those that have recently discovered our shows and our video and the work that we've been doing, and for those of you that have been now longtime friends and seekers and that have joined me for years now, and every month, and the years have passed us by quickly, and we've done hundreds, if not thousands, of shows, and it's brought us to this point. And I think that we have really, as a group, been on the forefront of the gathering momentum of truth in its beckoning and its calling out to people, trying to pique the interest of more and more into the answers that lay just out of reach, that just takes a little effort and a little persistence to come to discernment and revelation upon. And of course, all these things are dependent on, in my opinion, of course, on our relationship with the Most High, Father and Son, and the Holy Spirit, and that it takes knocking and seeking and wanting and desiring, a yearning to know more than what we're being taught and are being told is relevant and important in life and being. And so I do thank those of you that have and can for joining us, and I do invite those of you that are new, that don't know about FallenAngels.tv and the network there and the gathering of the people and the dialogue and the fellowship that we share there, to join us and to share what you can in whatever way you may wish, that the network gives you opportunity to utilize it as tool to have discourse with, Q&A with many other people. And I try to pop in there at least once or twice during the week and stay for a couple hours. Usually I make it between 1 and 4 p.m. on the weekdays. I have been terribly busy lately, but I will, after the production and the release of this next book, try to make a point of being available to people more often. But you can always send me mail on the website. I'm Fallen Angels TV, so if you want to just send me a message, I'll be glad to answer any questions, or if you have something you would like to share with me, I always appreciate that as well. If you ask me something, just give me a little bit of time to get back with you. I normally do answer people within 1 or 2 days, but sometimes it may take me even up until a week, depending on what it is that I'm involved in. And I do have good news. I just received yesterday a proof copy of the Skyfall, and it looks really, really beautiful, and I'm just overjoyed and overwhelmed with how it's coming together, and that it's going to be released to the public really soon. And so I thank those of you that have been patient with me, because I know I've been talking about this work for a long time, probably even a year now, even before I had it to the point where it was going to be produced, which in itself is a long process, especially through tape publishing. And it's not anything negative on them at all. They do a masterful job, and they are professionals in their craft. And so I'm honored to be contracted through them. And I think that the reason that they do take a lengthy time to go through the process of publication is because of their professionalism, and because they do create just a superior quality book, and that they try to, before release, have all of the mistakes ironed out, that once it is released to the public and is available to the masses, that it is in high quality presentation that reflects well on them as well as the author. And so for that I am grateful. But just know that we might even be able to get this out before Christmas, and that would be a wonderful thing, because I think I told everybody that it would probably be a year, because it normally does take a year to go through the production process, but they will fast track this one and to squeeze it into probably a 5-month time span. And so for that, I'm very, very grateful, and thank all of you for coming to listen to the show. I've got some interesting stuff lined up for you. I want to I know I've covered this issue prior in great detail, but I'm going to approach it from a different angle today, and I'm going to try to include some stuff that is new even to those of you that are longtime listeners. But ever since I've been on Revolution Radio every Tuesday night, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, now on Revolution Radio on Studio B, I am hosting a show called Momentary Zen. And since we have been on the show, thank God and thank the Most High, thank His Son, we've broken into the top 10 on TalkStream Live every week that we've been on. And so it's been a great blessing. And my producers have been overly joyed and overly thrilled. And I am going to start asking people to be on with me. So, in fact, this upcoming Tuesday, I will have as guests with me on Revolution Radio Doug Elwell, who wrote the book The Sign of the Son of Man and the End of the Age, I believe is the full length, the name of the book. But he's also the host for Mysterious World, and he's done a lot of work and a lot of revelation on the giants and their interdiction, the Nephilim interdiction into the affairs of humanity. And so we'll have a very interesting discourse, and I do invite those of you that can to join us this Tuesday. I know that the time switch from me doing the shows with the hijacker from midnight to 2 a.m. To Tuesday night, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, has made it a lot more accessible, especially to this listening audience, because I do have a lot of East Coast listeners, and we do also have a lot of listeners from far off places, England included, Australia, and other parts of the Europe, which it makes it accessible to them as well. And so, and his book On Planet X is a revolutionary work. I think Doug is the only other person that I know that has had revelation on how the earth was recreated, the tohu wabohu that is spoken about in Genesis, in which other individuals called the gap theory. Because in my work and in his work, and I don't know of any others, but both of us have shown in our books, his the one on Planet X and mine on the Sons of God, my sixth book, and the work that I did on the Genesis timeline, I explain the devastation and the recreation of the earth and how it was that recreation of our planet is what made life and the quick multiplicity and replication of it possible, because it was after the destruction of Tiamat, because our planet used to be where the asteroid belt is now. It used to be a large watery planet that was, as it speaks of in Genesis, it talks about how prior to that devastation and that recreation, that this planet, that Tiamat was a large watery planet. It was fully engulfed in one ocean, just one giant ocean. There were no protruding land masses, and that it was also had a watery canopy, which prevented the stars, the sun and the moon, and all the celestial, the night sky that we are now privileged to be able to be witness to. All that was not possible in what was the first Earth, and it wasn't until after the destruction of the Earth, with which the Enuma Elish and all the other epic creation books, they speak about this. Even the Sumerians speak about this in their literature, which this was an ancient event. It goes way, way back into the annals of time and space as far as the history of the universe. And it was this event that is memorialized, immortalized by the Enuma Elish especially, and by other works, other creation epics from some of the Babylonians, the Akkadians, people like that wrote about this particular event. They called it the battle, the war between the Lord of Hosts and the dragon Tiamat. And for those that don't know, I'll just quickly speak about this event, and you can look to my sixth book for further information, or just look into the archives of this show on blogtalkradio.com. I've covered this in what was the destruction of the First World Age. So you can look up those particular shows, and I think I also covered it in some shows that I did on the timeline of creation, or the Genesis timeline. And so for those that want to know in greater detail what I'm talking about, then you can look to that. I'm also speaking about this in my seventh book, but not in great detail, not like I've covered in that sixth book on the Genesis timeline. But anyways, so what I was speaking about in Genesis, where it speaks about, it cites how that this planet used to, that the water canopy prevented the rays of the sun from, that it was a protective layer that protected the earth. And the reason we had this canopy is because the oceans engulfed the entire planet. And it wasn't until Nibiru, which was the 12th planet that came to be part of this solar system, was captured by the outer gaseous planets, Neptune and Uranus specifically, that once it was it speaks about this in the Enuma, as I said. It cites the net force, or the gravitational field of these outer planets, as shifting the trajectory of this planet Nibiru, and that it was captured by the gravitational field of the outer planets and led to assume a different orbit, which brought it to basically come up and to cross the ecliptic and at a point where it divided its orbit, splits the outer and the inner planets. And so, as I said earlier, Tiamat used to have an orbit where the asteroid belt is now, and that when it was shifted, it was brought into conflict. And another thing of interest, just for those that are trying to picture this, Nibiru, instead of circling in a counterclockwise fashion around the sun, it has an orbital trajectory which causes it to circle, and it comes up near where the asteroid belt is, and then it shoots way far out into space, and then comes up. So it has a very short. It's at one point very close to the sun, and at another point very far away from the sun. And when it comes into, and it spins opposite, it spins clockwise around the sun. The way the arms on a clock move, it spins that way, and its orbit is in that fashion. And where all the other planets spin in a counterclockwise fashion around the sun, Nibiru has an orbit that takes it in a clockwise fashion. And so it enters our solar system, and it's brought into conflict with the rotational field of these other planets. And that's why you see Pluto kind of laying on its side. You have one of the other outer planets that kind of is tilted on its ecliptic, and Venus actually spins in an opposite direction, so that there was a time long ago that Nibiru came in close proximity to Venus, and its great gravitational field actually caused Venus to spin backwards. And now Venus still has a slow rotation where it spins very, very slow in the opposite direction, not like the Earth, because the Earth spins, like a top, separate, it spins towards the right. Well, Venus spins towards the left, and it was because of this interaction with this particular planet so long ago that this happened. But anyways, when it came initially captured on its first orbit through our solar system, one of the moons of Nibiru actually came into conflict with the Earth and split the Earth asunder. And it hit the Earth where the Pacific Ocean is now, because the Pacific Ocean is a deep gouge. And the Earth, when it was split asunder in this way, it had to recoalesce as a planet, but it didn't go, totally into magma. The still some of the outer shell remained kind of rocky and more dense. It didn't become totally liquid as like the interior of the Earth. And so a lot of the Earth did recoalesce and had to reformulate, and then the ocean, what used to be the one ocean, moved into the cracks and the crevices that were exposing the impact of that devastation. And so that's why we have the deep oceans, and now we have all these different rivers and all these different oceans and all these different land masses protruding from the face of the earth. And all this, of course, is in accordance with the Most High God and with His desire, because that it was after that the planet, was populated with all the creatures and all the animals and all the different beings and even the pre-Adamic man. And remember, in Genesis it says that there was no man to till the garden, and also that there was no rain yet because the earth was watered from the mist from this watery canopy, and also that the sun and the sky, the moon and the stars had not yet were not yet visible. Not that there was a man yet on the planet to see them, but in God's infinite wisdom, He tells us in Genesis that after this devastation, after this recreation, that the sun and the stars and the moon, and that the earth also was brought into a new orbit, in that Mars and the earth switched orbits, and whereas Tiamat had once been outside of the orbit of Mars, it was now brought to the inside. And remember also that Mars used to be hospitable, much more hospitable to life and much more Earth-like than it is now. And it was after this flip and after this switch that it also lost some of its atmosphere, but that it still has atmosphere and still has water, and according to some of the photos, it still has forests, large forests of trees, and that Mars is still Earth-like to some degree, but not as hospitable for life as our planet is now. And it was once our planet was switched switched in place as far as the proximity to the sun, and that the Earth, the new Earth, what the Sumerians call Ki, because it took on a new name after this particular event, but that the new Earth was then in the perfect place to hold life, and that the Most High used it to begin the next chapter of what would be the focus of life and the evolvement of humanity, both pre-Adamic and modern, here upon this planet. And so everything was for purpose. Everything. Okay, anyways. All right, let's see. We're gonna go ahead and go into the garden parable because I want to bring some information out on that. and talk about some of the things that I've covered, because we have a lot of new listeners, and I was trying to make that point earlier, whether I did or not. Sometimes I get lost in tangent in trying to make a point. I get called off into another area of discussion, but I think all of these things are relevant, and there are a lot of new people that are just now becoming aware of the things that we've been speaking about for a long time. So I'm trying to, and they're very interested in this particular topic. And I know that when I was first led to this issue and to this information, that this was one that piqued my interest and occupied it for a very long time, and that I wanted to know more, and I wanted to know also why others weren't speaking about it, why it was that this was something that was not being taught in the churches. Why was it that everybody didn't know this and was not speaking about it? Why were there so few? And why was it that the few that did know about it, when they brought it up for discussion, or if they asked their pastors or preachers about it, why they were looked at like they were totally crazy, and then harassed for even bringing it up, And I know that those of you that have discovered this and that have embraced it as truth, that that you have gone through similar, especially if you have tried to share it. Because I did speak about these things with few individuals when I first awoke to these issues. This was a time when, the whole 9/11 events were fresh, and people were talking about, all those kind of conspiracy theories and speaking about the New World Order. And I would share this information with those that I could, talk to about those kind of things. But they just thought I was crazy and didn't want to hear about it, and thought that I was a blasphemer to even bring it up. And so I decided to write a book about it and just share all of the different things that I had compiled, which in my mind totally authenticated it as possibility, and that it was a revelation which again helped me to understand so much of what is not understandable within the Word, that triggers and relies upon this information for clarification. And so once I did fully accept this as truth, so many more aspects of the Word opened itself to me. And so I'm going to start today with a story, again from the Colburn Bible, because I haven't brought this one out, and I've never brought it out in its fullness in the way that I'm going to cover it today. And not many of you have heard much from the Colburn Bible, and if you have, it's mainly been on its covering of the destroyer, because it has great detail about the wormwood of Revelation, and it has incredible elucidation of what the Hopi call the blue star, red star Kachina, and also what we've come to know as Nibiru, Planet X. There's so many different names for it now. The sky monsters. And so this particular wisdom text, which is a secret book that has been passed down in within the lines of families for thousands of years. And it was just released in 2006. A copy of it was released to the public, and it was made available to us. And because I have great interest in reading all of the different old ancient texts and old ancient scriptures and books of wisdom from cultures worldwide, I picked this up and read it and discovered that it also has something to say about Adam and Eve and Lucifer, and how Cain was a result of that fornication. And so I'm going to read this story to you, and just to give you up front, the names are a little bit changed. They call Lucifer Lewid, Lewid. They call Adam Dadam, Dadam, and Eve is called Maeva, Maeva. So the names are just a little bit changed, but you can see the similarities in the story. And so I'm going to share this with you, and then we'll go into some of the traditional scriptures which connect and tie into this. And also, if you have any questions that you want to ask that are relating to this particular topic, certainly put them there in the chat room. But know that when I'm reading, I won't be able to look into the chat room. So wait till after this story is completed, and then I will get to your questions. All right. It says this: Lewid grew up tall and handsome. He was quick to learn and became wise. He was also a man of the chase, strong and enduring, a hunter of renown. But there were times when the call of his people was strong, and then he would go out furtively into the night to indulge in their dark rituals. Thus he became knowledgeable in the ways of the flesh and in the carnal indulgences of the body. Dadam became a servant of the sacred enclosure where the misty veil between the realms could be penetrated. For all those having the blood of Aurora had twin sight, an ability to see Ras and Sithfolk, Ansys, and spirit beings, all the things of the other world, not clearly, but as through a veil. Beside the place called Geyser was a pleasant parkland with trees of every kind, and a stream, also thickets of flowering bushes and all manner of plants growing lushly. It was the custom of Maeva to wander there in the sunshine, and Lewid also went there. So it came about that they met among the trees. Maeva knew the man, but had shunned him in the past. Now she saw his handsome, of many attractions, and so her foot was stayed, and she did not run away. As the days passed, they dallied longer together, and Lewid talked of things Maeva had never heard before. She felt the stirring in her blood, but did not respond or heed his temptations, because of the things which were forbidden. And so Lewid went to the Moon Mother, wise woman of the Yoslings, and telling of his desires, beseeched her to help him. The Moon Mother gave him 2 apples containing a vile substance, which they had drawn through their stalks. This Lewid gave to Maeva, who then became helpless in his hands. They met again after this, for Maeva became enamored towards Lewid, but it happened that she became ill with a strange sickness and was afraid. Then Dadam became ill, and Luid also. And Luid said to the woman, "You must obtain the pure essence from within the sacred enclosure." And Setina, the moon mother, will prepare an elixir which will cure us. This he said because none of his kind had ever been able to obtain the sacred substance, though they had always coveted what had been denied them. Now, because of her frailty, the woman was pliable in his hands, and Luid seized the opportunity. To achieve his ends, Luid gave Maeva a potion which had been prepared by the moon mother, and she administered this to Didam and those with him by guile and deceit, so that they fell asleep. And while they slept, Maeva stole from the sacred substances and took them to Luid, who gave them to the moon mother, and she made a brew. Part of this was given to Maeva, and the rest was drunk by the Yoslings from their offal and kidal during their night rites. And when the morning came, they were all smitten with grievous pains. And before the sun set that day, all of the Yoslings were stricken with a sickness such as they had not known before. Maeva took what had been given to her, and finding Didam laid low in his bed, gave him a draught from her vessel, though she had to use womanly wiles to get him to drink it. She drank the remainder, and they both slept. But when they awoke in the morning, both were suffering pains, and this was something they had not known before. Didam said to the woman, "What have you done? For what has happened to us cannot be unless those things which are forbidden have been done." The woman replied, "Lord, I was tempted and I fell. I have done things which are forbidden and unforgivable." Didam said, "I am bound by duty to do certain things, but first let us go into the geyser to the place called Beth Kel Chris, where I will seek enlightenment." And so they went there together and stood before the shrine beneath the tree of wisdom. There they were filled with an inflowing vision, seeing themselves as they were and as they should have been. And they were ashamed. He, because he had not followed the proper path of a man, and she, because of her falsity. There, in the reflecting mist, the contamination of the woman was revealed, and the man's heart shriveled within him like a flower licked by a flame. Then they saw a great spirit being materializing in the reflecting mist, and he said to them, "Woe to you and your house, for the greatest of evils has befallen the race of the children of God, and it is defiled. The heritage is lost. The fetid flow defiling the woman results from the incompatible intermingling. But it is not all, for sickness and diseases are also generating from the ferments of the impure implantation." Didam said, "The fault is with the woman, wherefore should I suffer?" The spirit being replied, "Because you two are now as one. The cankerworms of disease and sickness strike both equally, but you shall not again defile this place. Henceforth the misty veil becomes an impenetrable barrier, severing our two realms from each other, so they can no longer be easily spanned. Between us there will now be no means of communication. Henceforth man and woman, fated to unite in love divine, shall be divided and set apart. Though ever yearning reunion, they may cleave one to the other, seeking the unity which will rekindle the flame. But unless their efforts transcend the limitations of earthly things, they will be in vain. The spirit of man is now severed from the whole and cast again into unconsciousness. And it too shall long for reunion with the whole. The spark shall seek to return to the fire, but otherwise it becomes nothing. The web of fate is rewoven, and the path of destiny remade. The design of life is redrawn. Again the progression begins in ignorance, birth and death, pain and pleasure, joy and sorrow, success and failure, love and hate, peace and war, all the light and shade, the many hues making the splendidly intricate pattern of life on earth. This is a new beginning, but a beginning not in purity and unencumbered, but one already weighted with debts and burdens. The Spirit being continued, enough wickedness has been wrought by your willfulness and disobedience, for the decrees forbidding certain things were for your own benefit. Immortality was nearly within your reach, but had you achieved this, you would have been brought an even more grievous evil upon yourselves and your inheritors. For freed from servitude to change, you and they would have been unable to progress. This is from the Colburn Bible, the story of Ma'eva and Dedam. Now, I want to say just real quick, and I'm not saying in any way that this particular story is, inspired, and that it's, gospel in any way at all. But I do think it is greatly interesting for those that are interested in the knowledge that we're about to go into, because there's so much out there that is connected to the information of Cain being a progeny, being a child born from the nativity, the birth, and being sired from the firstborn son of Eve and the angel Samael. And for those that know about Samael, it's the same thing as Satan. It's another name that the Targums and also that the Gnostic texts they give to Satan, which Samael means the venom of God, and he is also known as being the guardian angel of Esau and the patron of the Empire of Rome. And he's also known in the Targums, as I said, he's also called the serpent that was in the garden, because when it references the serpent in Genesis chapter 3, where it speaks about, in the King James Version of the Bible, the serpent, it actually cites in the Targums that the serpent was called Samael and refers to him as Samael and not as the serpent. And so, anyways, now I want to cover something that, well, first I'm gonna read that particular passage that I had spoken to you about as far as the Targums, just so you can hear how the Targums lay out what occurred within the garden in paradise, that led to the beguilement of Eve that is spoken about in so many different texts. It says it like this: And the woman beheld Samael, the angel of death, and was afraid. Yet she knew that the tree was good to eat, and that it was medicine for the enlightenment of the eyes, and a desirable tree by means of which to understand. And she took of its fruit and did eat, and she gave to her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of both were enlightened, and they knew that they were naked, divested of the purple robe in which they had been created. And they saw the sight of their shame, and sewed to themselves the leaves of figs, and made to them cinctures. One other thing from the Targums that I want to share, which is really interesting, which also gives confirmation. I'm not going to go into the whole Genesis 4:1, even though I've covered that in many different shows. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. I'll just read one passage of it, just to show you how the Targums are different. And for those that don't know what the Targums are, the Targums were the different language translations that were made based on the Hebrew Torah. This is in our ancient past. This is going back to the time when Daniel and the other patriarchs of the Hebrew line had been exiled after the time of Hezekiah, when his eyes were taken after the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, and the same that Jeremiah was speaking about in his work, and which his scribe Baruch had written down in many of the ancient texts leading to that particular destruction. That Jeremiah was telling the people before it happened and before it occurred, that if they didn't change their ways, that they would be taken into exile. And so when they were taken into exile, they became assimilated over the 70 years that they spent there in Babylon. They became assimilated into that particular culture, and they took up different languages. And the language of the day, Aramaic. And so they became speakers of Aramaic and also Palestinian. And so the Targums were these different language translations that were done by the different the priestly line, those that were in charge of the synagogue, and those that were the educated masses among the Hebrew people of the time, the priestly class, the line of Levi, that they were the ones that created these different language translations. And these translations were read side by side in the synagogues once the temple was destroyed. And in the synagogues, because the people no longer spoke Hebrew, they would listen to these Targum translations, and they were very careful when they created these different language translations for them to be, very representative in a detailed manner what was spoken about in the Hebrew Torah. And so these translations, when you read them, because we have now English translations of those translations, and they are mildly different. They give greater detail and more clarity to some of the things that are left out in what is the King James Version of our Bibles, which are also based on the Torah. Okay, and so just going to cover this real quick. One of those which is the most interesting that also, again, names Samael as being the one that beguiled Eve is a translation which goes like this, Genesis 4:1. And also, just for those that, because I always get, asked, well, how can this be if it says in the King James Version of our Bible, Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, and Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. Well, even in this particular line, if you look very closely at it, there's a semicolon. And Adam knew Eve, his wife, semicolon. And then a completely different thought. And she conceived and bare Cain. Well, when you read the Targums, you understand why that semicolon is there and how it is that this sentence gives the illusion that Adam is that after Adam knew his wife Eve, that Cain was the result of that knowing, when it's not true. They did that, I think, purposely to hide this particular fact. It says this, 4:1 in the Targum. Adam knew his wife Eve, who was pregnant by the angel Samael. That part's been left out. And instead of that part being there, there's a semicolon. Adam knew his wife Eve, semicolon, and then this part is left out, who was pregnant by the angel Samael, comma, and she conceived and bare Cain. And so without that particular clarification, who was pregnant by the angel Samael, you would think, of course, that Cain was the child of Adam and Eve, because in the very beginning, the first part of that paragraph, that's what it says. And so let me read the whole thing. Adam knew his wife Eve, who was pregnant by the angel Samael. She conceived and bare Cain, and he was like the heavenly beings, and not like the earthly beings. And she said, I have acquired a man, the angel of the Lord. Okay, so I want to just cover this other part real quick. This is what it says in chapter 5 of the Targum, and then we're going to go to Matthew chapter 13 on the garden parable. This is the book of the genealogy of man. In the day that the Lord created man, in the likeness of the Lord he made him. Male and female, he created them and blessed them in the name of his word. And he called their name man in the day that they were created. Adam lived 130 years and begat Sheth, who had the likeness of his image and his similitude. For before had Hava, who is Eve, born Cain, who was not like to him, and Abel was killed by his hand. And Cain was cast out, neither is his seed genealogized in the book of the genealogy of Adam. But afterwards there was born one like him, and he called his name Sheth. And so you see in this, it cites specifically that Sheth was born because Abel was killed by his brother Cain, and that Sheth or Seth had Adam's image and was similitude in his likeness. And it also speaks directly to, for before had Eve borne Cain, who was not like of him, Abel was killed by his hand, Cain was cast out, neither is his seed genealogized in the book of the genealogy of Adam. All right, but quickly go on because I know we're running out of time. Let me check the chat room real quick. Okay. All right. Continuing on. Now remember, for those that don't know, Christ speaks about this as well in many different passages, but specifically in the book of John, he talks about, and the book of Matthew, he speaks about how this information, Cain being a child of the devil, is one of those secrets hidden since the foundation of the world. Real quickly before we go into Matthew, I'll share with you a verse from John chapter 8. It says this: I know that you are Abraham's seed, but yet you seek to kill me, because my word finds no place in you. I say the things which I have seen with my father, and you also do the things which you have seen with your father. They answered him, Our father is Abraham. Jesus said to them, If you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth, which I heard from God. Abraham didn't do this. You do the works of your father. They said to him, We were not born of sexual immorality. We have one Father, God. Therefore Jesus said to them, If God were your Father, you would love me, for I came out and have come from God. For I haven't come of myself, but he sent me. Why don't you understand my speech? Because you can't hear my word. You are of your father, the devil, and you want to do the desire of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning, and doesn't stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks on his own, for he is a liar and its father. But because I tell you the truth, you don't believe me. Which of you convicts me of sin? If I tell the truth, why do you not believe me? He who is of God hears the words of God, because you don't hear, because you are not of God. There are many, many passages which connect to this. I won't go into all of them in great detail. Matthew chapter 23, verse 29 through 35. He accuses the Pharisees of being the murderers of the patriarchs, and he says that upon you come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias. So here he's linking Abel, who we know was killed by Cain. He's linking the Pharisees and the church authorities as being the killers, and linking them to the seed of the serpent, and connecting to Cain. And so we see how he's told us in so many ways, in so many passages, and yet for those that don't believe this, they'll always go back to Genesis chapter 4:1, that find this, just completely difficult to embrace as possibility. They always hang on Genesis 4:1, when in so many other instances it confirms this knowledge. And even in Genesis 4:1 in the King James Version of the Bible, once you have a full understanding of what has been left out, and what we are not privy to, it it totally makes sense. Because in Genesis chapter 4, in the full entirety of Genesis chapter 4, that chapter is about the lineage and bloodline of Cain. And you don't find mention of the lineage and bloodline of Adam until Genesis chapter 5. And it begins with Seth. Abel was killed by his brother. And once you do have understanding of this, passages like John chapter 3, verse 12, not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother, and wherefore slew he him? Because his own works were evil, and his brother's righteous. So much. Like when the Pharisees and Sadducees are called a generation of the vipers. All these different things are linked to this particular information. And he again expressly speaks about this with Matthew chapter 13, where he without question, after having sent away the multitudes and his apostles, the patriarchs of old, come up to him and ask him to tell him about the parable of the wheat and the tares, and to explain it not in parable form. Because beforehand, in the early part of Matthew chapter 13, he's speaking to the multitude. And he says later to his apostles, it is given to you to know the secrets and to them to not know the secrets. And so he says these things in parable form. And so he says, speak I to them in parables, for they seeing see not, they hearing hear not, neither do they understand. And so he uses parables to intrigue them into studying and to coming to understand what he is meaning by these particular parables. But after having sent the multitudes away, his followers, his disciples, come up to him, ask him to tell them directly what the parable of the wheat and the tares are. He says to them, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. While the men slept, his enemy came, sowed tares among the wheat, went his way. But when the blade was sprung up, brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servant of the householder came, said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? He said unto them, An enemy hath done this. The servant said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while you gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow until the harvest, and in the time of the harvest I will say to the reapers, Gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. And so, the whole thing with the garden parable, and when I speak of the garden parable, I'm talking about the metaphor, the symbology behind the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Because everybody thinks that when Eve ate of this fruit, this tree, this fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that she ate an apple, even though it spoke about these apples being used by Lewid in the parable in the Colburn Bible. The real fruit led to their loss of immortality, loss to them being transformed into flesh form, where she was seduced, beguiled, corrupted by Samael, and that this corruption impregnated her with Cain. That is the garden parable. And Christ speaks about that parable by giving another parable that is based on the garden as well. That parable that I just read. Now, to give clarity to both of those parables, listen to what he says after he sends the multitudes away. He says this. And this again is from Matthew chapter 13. Then Jesus sent the multitude away and went into the house, and his disciples came unto him, saying, Declare unto us the parable of the tares of the field. He answered and said unto them, He that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. He that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be in the end of this world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity, and shall cast them into a furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. So again, just to give clarity for those of you that are doubting Thomases, that don't want to believe this because of you're still hung up on Genesis chapter 4:1, even after the other things that I've alluded to. In explaining the garden parable, you don't want to believe. You want to really believe that Eve ate of an apple or a fig or a pomegranate, whatever it is that they say that the fruit was. Lines, Christ's own words, the red letters. It gives clarity and should give clarity. And you can't just say this is all metaphorical and this is after he sends the multitudes away and says that he's going to tell them plainly without parable, declare unto us the parable of the tares of the field. And then he says, that he that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. He is that because Adam was created in his image. The field is the world, the field, the garden. The good seed are the children of the kingdom. The tares are the children of the wicked one. I mean, it can't get any more plainer. And to give, increasing emphasis on that, the next line tells you again, the enemy that sowed them is the devil, Samael, the angel of death, the dragon, the Nakash. Because, if he just left it children of the wicked one, again, people would take it out of context and say, oh, it's just symbolically, but then he says the enemy that sowed them is the devil. They are from the loins of the devil. It's not just some spiritual something. It's an actual physical something. And so, I think and Christ knew that they were going to not want to believe. And so he wants to give clarity to those that would come later. Because it's given to us, this generation, to know that the secrets. And he also says later in that chapter that this is one of those secrets that has been hidden since the foundation of the world. And so I know, we have new listeners that have joined us in the chat room, and there are now new listeners that are listening in that haven't joined us in the chat room, that are now listening to this show, because on the show that I do with Revolution Radio, I don't read all the scriptures. I don't bring forth the information like I do here in connecting it to so much that I do share and read here, because I bring a lot of scriptural references which tie all of this together. I'm going to share one last story with you, and this is from the Protevangelion of James. And this gives, also clarity to this particular story. It says, I'm going to just share two more passages, quick passages. This is when Joseph comes home and finds his bride, because Joseph was a widowed man. He was a constructor, a builder of houses, and worked with wood. They said he was a carpenter. But he comes home, and he was already widowed. He was the elderly man, and he was the caretaker, chosen by God to be the caretaker over Mary, who was a 14-year-old virgin. And he took her out of the temple, because they usually betroth 14-year-olds to be married during that particular time. But Mary did not want to be married, did not want to have children. She wanted to remain pure and chaste. And so the priest prayed about it, and then allowed God, the Most High, to decide who would be her husband. And God chose this elderly widowed man, Joseph, to be basically her caregiver and her caretaker, because they never knew her in a carnal way. And the other children, brothers and sisters, mentioned as being the brothers and sisters of Christ, they were the half brothers and sisters of Christ from Joseph's former marriage. And so Joseph comes home, finds her pregnant, and he says this: "For I received her out of the temple of the Lord my God, a virgin, and have not kept her safe. Who is he that hath ensnared me? Who hath done this evil in mine house, and hath defiled the virgin? Is not the story of Adam repeated in me? For as at the hour of his giving thanks, the serpent came and found Eve alone, and deceived her, so hath it befallen me also." So here again, has not the story of Adam been repeated in me? Meaning the same thing that happened to Adam, it happened to him, in that his wife, the Virgin Mary, is now pregnant. So meaning that not only did the people and those of his time know that Eve had been seduced by the serpent, and that she was already pregnant, Cain, before Adam ever knew her. It's saying the same kind of thing. And for as at the hour of his giving thanks, the serpent came and found Eve alone and deceived her, so hath it befallen me also. So here we have the same, the story being repeated, just in a different way. Meaning that, again, those that of the early church, the early disciples, the early followers and disciples of Christ, they knew that Satan was the father of Cain. And one last passage, really short. Well, actually, we might not be able to cover this. Yeah, we won't be able to cover this. But I'm going to share another passage that I don't usually read, which talks, and it's a shorter passage than the one before. It says, "Nevertheless, the countenance of my son Cain was not like unto ours, for he seemed to have the mark of the Satans upon him, although this was not clearly visible to the outward eye. But I rejoiced in my son and sought to raise him up unto Jehovah. This is the generations of Adam, chapter 4. And so there's many, many different passages. Of course, I couldn't cover all of them. Even in Isaiah chapter 14, speaking about Satan or Lucifer, the morning star, he's called the abominable branch because he was the one that created, the children of Cain, the bloodline of Cain. It says the seed of evildoers shall never be renowned. Prepare slaughter for his children, for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities. For I will rise up against them, saith the Lord of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name and remnant, and son and nephew, saith the Lord. Talking about how he's not going to allow them to, take over the planet. There's so many things that are linked to this particular knowledge. If you want them in entirety, read my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain. That you can get all of that, all of these things connected together, all in one place. Lucifer, Father of Cain. It covers this in great detail. I cite in scripture and passage from all of these different myriads and of different texts, which I have never known prior to ever be connected in this way, and also that this information that all of these different scriptures and wisdom texts that are available to us now have never been available to previous generations in the way that they are to us. And so you can go and read and verify all these things for yourself. And you'll find that this information is alluded to in so many different places. One last line, again from the Colburn Bible, it said, the fetid flow defiling the woman results from the incompatible intermingling, but it is not all, for sickness and diseases are also generating from the ferment of the impure implantation. The impure implantation. And so all of that is there. It's all found. You can go and look and find more information for yourself and get led to discernment on these topics. God bless all. Remember, this Tuesday. Oh, and also I'm going to be on with John the Baptist tomorrow night, speaking about the prior times. God bless. Good night, all.
And we know that she's around, and your DNA's the key, and now you know the mystery.
You think about the family the Bible talks about. Now listen to these verses and learn what it's about. The women of the family that God cared about couldn't have any children without his help, no doubt. They were barren, you see, not 1, 2, or 3, but all 4 and more, and that's for sure. All these women from the tribes had no children in their lives, and here they are by name. Now listen to this theme. We got Sarah and Rebecca, for Rachel Leah to boot. And none of these women could bear any fruit. A new season's down to bring that devil down. God did it with blood, not just mud. The name Adam in Hebrew, it's a root word for blood. It means many things, just one means mud. But the Bible has layers just like wheat and tares, and we're letting you into the original sin.
You see, the serpent had his seed, and he did an nasty deed, and he did it with no even. Yes, you surely did conceive, and out came Cain, who the Lord God disdained. Ain't it a shame? The seed, it still remains. Yeah, it's hard to believe, but if you have eyes to see, and we know it's hard to hear, but once you lend us your ear, the words are written down, and we know the seed's around, and your DNA's the key, and now you know the mystery.
So now you know the truth, that's the devil's type of fruit. Was not the kind for eating, but the fruit for bequeathing. So when Eve was beguiled, she got pregnant and defiled. The new way of life was to work and live in strife. Now the entire human race was headed for disgrace. But the Lord had a plan, he had a son made into man. And that's who we are from a distant planet star, making right what was wrong and to teach it through the song. We are mostly mixed and mingled, not just one group is single. The human race has been infected and it can be detected. It's not the color of your skin or the nation you live in. It's all about the choice. His sheep will know his voice.
You see, the serpent had his seed, and he did an nasty deed, and he did it with no even. Yes, you surely did conceive, and out came Cain, who the Lord God disdained. Ain't it a shame? The seed, it still remains. Yeah, it's hard to believe, but if you have eyes to see, and we know it's hard to hear, but once you lend us your ear, the words are written down, and we know the seed's around, and your DNA's the key, and now you know the mystery. You see, the serpent had his seed, and he did an nasty deed, and he did it with no even. Yes, you surely did conceive, and out came Cain, who the Lord God disdained. Ain't it a shame? The seed, it still remains. Yeah, it's hard to believe, but if you have eyes